Hello and welcome to What the Tech from Boast, where we talk with some of the brilliant minds behind new and exciting tech initiatives to learn what it takes to tackle technological uncertainty and eventually change the world. I'm Paul Davenport, Boast resident tech journalist, and today I'm thrilled to welcome to the show Dion Kelly, co-founder and CEO at Possibility Neurotechnologies. There, Dion and her team are dedicated to empowering individuals with disabilities to fully participate in life on their own terms. Their mission is grounded in fundamental human rights outlined by the United Nations that everyone should be empowered to express themselves, connect with others, and participate fully in life. Guided by these standards, Dion and her team developed Think to Switch, a brain control technology that transforms thoughts into actions, empowering users with communication and movement challenges to connect, create, and thrive in ways that were once unimaginable. Along with steering this groundbreaking innovation at Possibility, Dion is also one of the few researchers in the world with expertise in brain computer interfaces. She's leveraged her background in both neuroscience and biomedical technology to advance the field of neurotechnology at large, while bringing knowledge gained across her academic journey, visiting more than 40 countries to ensure there's a global perspective in all the work that she does. It's an amazing mission, and I can't wait to pick Dion's brain about her path as an entrepreneur and what's next for Possibility Neurotechnologies as they embark on 2026. So, without further ado, welcome to the show, Dion.
Thank you, Paul, for the fantastic introduction and for inviting me to be here today.
Well, I am honored to have you. Again, like I said in that intro, this is an impressive background, and you're one of the few people in the world who are doing what you do. So, I want to hear from you. Tell me about your journey through the ecosystem, your academic research, your path as an entrepreneur, even just working in the tech space broadly, for our listeners at home.
Yeah, I guess so. On my entrepreneurial journey, I never really set out thinking that I was going to build a company, and for a long time, I didn't really think of myself as an entrepreneur at all. But hindsight is 2020, and when I look back, I realized that the spirit was probably always there. Like a lot of people, I started out, with the classic lemonade stands. I experimented with different flavors, selling baked goods at one point. But one of my more memorable ventures was when I was about 10 years old. And I used to buy clothes from secondhand stores, redesign them, and sell them at local markets. And by the time I was finishing high school, I was actually planning to apply to fashion school. So if you had told me I'd become a neuroscientist and build a neurotechnology company, I would not have believed you.
That's amazing. I love that some of the coolest stories are folks who don't realize they've always had that entrepreneurial spirit. It's something that they've been practicing their whole lives, but they weren't setting out to just build a business for the sake of building a business. They actually wanted to solve problems. They wanted to deliver goods. They wanted to actually address needs too. So love the lemonade stand. Again, some of the most interesting conversations we have are folks who literally they just did the lemonade stand back in the day. But I also love this fashion approach and what could have been too. Like we talked to a lot of folks who even in the tech space have built some pretty cool fashion-oriented solutions. So I'm thinking like shout out to Athea Rastogi. She is working on something at SnapRite that's really impressive. We've had her on the show previously too, but very curious how again, fashion school was one journey you were going to go down, very different journey going into neurotechnology. So explain that to me a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was more so the creative process because I had my sights set on fashion school. I was going to apply to Ryerson University for their fashion program. So throughout high school, I actually did a specialized high skills major, they were called, in art. So I was like building out this art portfolio, taking all these art classes. I took fashion, went to New York on a field trip, and then I just took science classes for fun because I thought they were interesting. I loved chemistry, I loved biology. And then by the time I finished high school, I took a year off, traveled to, try to open my mind up to what I really want to do for the rest of my life, which is what I always ask myself. And now I realize it's such a daunting question and puts so much pressure on people, kids more specifically. But, yeah, it was really that creative process that I enjoyed, and when it came time to apply for university, I remember asking myself, "What's the likelihood that I could make it really big in the fashion industry?" I think it's super competitive and, I don't really know how realistic that is for me. So, I actually decided to play it safe, and I remember thinking to myself, "Well, I think there's a lot of options, a lot of places I could go if I pursued science. So that's what I did. That's how I ended up pursuing science in university and then became interested in neuroscience and yeah, figured it out each step.
Makes so much sense. I love how you frame that too, playing it safe by doing what to me sounds like the hardest thing you possibly could. Um, I actually see some more parallels too from the stories personally. My sister is an art teacher. Well, she's an artist, but
Mhm.
she also just is a creative and also too is just hungry to learn. She teaches AP courses now. She does so much more than just do her art path because she's able to stretch her creativity and think and what else is going to be satisfying for me and also reasonable on the long term beyond just being a starving artist, which no shade to my sister. I think she definitely, definitely has had a lot of success in that field. And you very clearly have taken that creativity and parlayed it into a very exciting career. One question that's a little not off script, but I love how you mentioned travel to kind of like discover and broaden your horizons about what you want to do in life. Like I mentioned earlier, 40 plus countries visited. Could you explain how that gave you the perspective to kind of set you on a different course than you probably ever realized you would be going down?
Yeah, so when I graduated from high school, I took a year off, traveled for 8 months. I spent some time in Australia for 5 months, and then traveled all around Southeast Asia. And I remember when I first set foot in Southeast Asia, I was in Bali, and I had such a culture shock. And yeah, just felt so out of place, like had no idea what was going on. I remember it was very chaotic in that airport, and, yeah, it just felt really uncomfortable, and I actually loved that. I loved the feeling of being uncomfortable and having to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and I think that, yeah, traveling and experiencing new cultures really helps to promote that.
Get comfortable being uncomfortable. I love that phrase. It is one we've heard echoed on the show before too, because I think it's kind of at the heart of being an entrepreneur. You have to really find
Yeah,
your way to like find comfort in that discomfort and honestly just make a home in it. And obviously, it's not going to be the trajectory forever because you can take on something new once you do get to that comfort level too, which again is why I think it compounds when you're working on good projects and you're working on very powerful things and you embrace that uncertainty and like solutioning and like actually getting to the heart of problems. It's just a recipe for success. So I want to make sure that I really draw a fine line under that because again, it's something that we hear from the most interesting and exciting innovators who we have on the show. So happy to hear that. Now, moving into what you're doing today and at Possibility Neurotechnologies. Tell me specifically about this company, how you've built it, how it all came together. And I know I alluded to some of the things that you're trying to tackle, but I'd love to hear it from you.
yeah, so Possibility Neurotechnologies is a neurotechnology company. We're focused on building brain computer interface technologies that allow people to interact with the world using their thoughts. So, our first product is called Think to Switch, and it's a bit like Siri for your thoughts. So, it translates the brain signals from off the shelf brain sensing headsets into usable commands so that you can control things like computers or toys or smart devices. And there's so many of these brain sensing headsets on the market for different use cases. Most of the time for meditation, there's also some for sleep tracking, but there's not really a consumer grade headset out there that is used for brain computer interfacing. So when you're actually controlling something using your thoughts.
I am so impressed by that. Yeah, when you said there were so many different kinds of headsets on the market, I was like, I've never heard of anything like you have described. It seemed very sci-fi to me. We work with VisWorks actually, who I believe are also up in Calgary, and they actually one of the quotes from that interview was like, "Sci-fi is what we're chasing here a little bit." I know that's kind of like the dorky side of where I take that on, but that is so cool. So consumer grade too. I think that's really exciting. Because this sounds like something that you would expect would be so specialized that it wouldn't actually be publicly available, and therefore
Yeah.
solving the problems that you're trying to solve. And to again call back on what we were saying in the intro, you're really making sure that it's for specific individuals and specific kinds of folks with maybe, I don't want to say disabilities or anything like that, but with communication issues, or dig into a little bit about the ideal user here on the consumer side.
Yeah, yeah. So actually, the reason that we are targeting these consumer headsets and really positioning ourselves as a consumer technology is because we want Think to Switch to be available to anybody who wants to try brain controlled interaction. So we're not making it for any specific person or any specific user, but we are developing it alongside a lot of users who have been left behind from technology development, and that is users with significant um, needs, support needs. So, movement disabilities and communication disabilities, and kids, because kids are often left behind from, well, innovations in general and, devices, pharmaceuticals in many aspects. And so, if we develop our technology with them in mind, then it should be usable by most people.
I love that. That's actually a very good perspective too. If you tackle that market again where there's that acute need too, you can then parlay the actual use cases into so much more. And I love to, I'm thinking back to what you were saying about being in Bali and getting uncomfortable and things like that and getting that global perspective. I know a lot of this is based on UN human rights mandates. And I think that it's not just admirable. I think it's actually something, again, that could have widespread implications because you're thinking about people who maybe weren't walking in your shoes when you were in high school or something like that. So I, again, want to call back that point. It is rooted in a global, concern and a global support framework. Is that correct
Yeah,
characterization?
yeah, absolutely. And just like you said, along human rights, the World Health Organization, they actually released a report on assistive technology, and they specifically acknowledged the fact that those who experience the greatest barriers to accessing technologies that will help facilitate their basic human rights of, participating in life and communicating, interacting, expressing themselves. Those are people with the most significant disabilities and children. And so we're developing this with them in mind and alongside them. We work super closely with children with quadriplegic cerebral palsy and their families to make sure that everything that we do is with them and not just for them.
With them, not just for them. That's a beautiful ethos, to be honest. Um, that does kind of allude to a change of gears that I'd like to take us down to just in the conversation. Now, we've talked about the global community. I do want to emphasize that we've actually met each other through the platform Calgary, the more local community that you have up there. As listeners know, I'm based here in Boston, but those are my guys. I really love the platform Calgary team because I think they exemplify like it does take a village, but you need to be able to lean on everybody. And you also need to be able to get elbow to elbow with everybody. Could you maybe talk a little bit about just how different tech ecosystems, whether it's Platform Calgary at a local level or just other folks who are in the neurotechnology space, have kind of helped bring this all together for you?
Yeah, yeah, we have experienced a ton of support within the Calgary ecosystem. And I always say, like, that's why I stayed in Calgary. That's why I decided to build this company in Calgary because, I mean, all my family is in Ontario. And so when I finished my PhD, there wasn't really anything keeping me here. But ultimately, I felt like Calgary was the best place to build this company. So we've had so much support from every single program that's offered by the University of Calgary and innovation programs like Platform Calgary, CDL, Rockies as well. That was a great program. And we've had support from the government of Alberta, the Ontario Brain Institute, the Mars Discovery District, which is in Toronto, Ontario, as well as the Cerebral Palsy Alliance in Australia. So I've actually been spending a lot of time down there over the past few months, and yeah, the support has really been widespread, and it's been incredible.
That is amazing. I love First off, that you shouted out Mars Discovery District. We had a series of really good interviews with folks who were part of that organization and just members of like their cohorts. They might not call it cohorts, but whatever the current class was when we were talking to them last year. And to your point, I'm so impressed with what is getting executed in Canada, even though it takes a global village, like we said. Some of the organizations that you named in Calgary, but even just like the federal funding programs, whether you're taking advantage of like my tax or something like that to
Yep,
make sure that you're bringing folks
NITAX as
in.
well.
Yeah, I think that's an incredible one that I want to make sure we shout out because I don't think people always know about it or think that they would actually qualify for that. And it brings people who are passionate because they're learning and they're getting their degrees and they're getting on their own path into the fold for businesses that need that energy. So programs like that, I'd be remiss if I didn't shout about the Shred program that Boast helps folks
Mhm.
with. Yep, that's our bread and butter, but we again think that there are so many opportunities for businesses across Canada and so many programs that will meet a wide array of needs. I'm not picking favorites. I'm down here in the States, but it's a challenge down here sometimes to get that. I think I'm very fortunate being in Boston and being in Massachusetts because locally we have a lot of similar programs. But I think at the federal, provincial, even just in the city of Calgary, so many things that you can take advantage of to build a world changing business like yours. So, yeah,
Yeah.
needed to shout that one out. So, did want to ask next. What's next? What's on the horizon? What are you guys going to be executing? What's the game plan for getting this consumer grade product out the door?
Yeah, well, the last 6 months, well, actually, in the last year, we had to pivot in the way that we were offering our technology platform, the way that we were offering Think to Switch, and we built out a mobile app, and we're actually getting ready to launch it on the App Store in the next couple of weeks, which is a huge milestone for our team. We have had an incredible network of early adopters that uh, have spanned, well, globally. We've got some people in the US, Canada, Australia, Singapore, the UK. So we have people all over the place who have really helped us develop this into a product that is going to meet people's needs and hopefully exceed their expectations. So yeah, we're getting ready to launch it and get it more widely accessible.
I love that. And I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier too about working like with these people and working with a wide array of needs and support systems to make sure that you can develop all of this. That's what makes a powerful product. I'm so impressed this is close to reality in terms of the launch. So congratulations. I will be marking my calendar and checking in with you guys just to make sure I want to know how this thing's going. But this is amazing. I really can't thank you enough, Dion, for being on the show. Was there anything else you wanted to shout out or anything you wanted to mention just before we kind of wrap things up here?
I would just like to emphasize again the incredible opportunities that we have here in Canada with the breadth of non-dilutive funding, and yeah, I'm really grateful for all of that funding that we've been able to access because it's really allowed us to develop the technology and validate the technology as we prepared to raise our first equity round, which we did last summer, and now we're preparing to raise our next round this summer. So yeah, those grants have been invaluable to us.
I love that. And I'm so glad that you brought that point up too, because to your point, programs, the grants, the tax credits, they unlock a virtuous cycle for businesses because it's rewarding them for doing work that passes a threshold of technological uncertainty that the government wants to really support and not even be in business with, but make sure can be cultivated in Canada to make positive change, I think, on a global scale. And so that virtuous cycle is again, if you're continuing to claim these programs, and you should be, you're going to hit that standard that is very high from the CRA to make sure that you're actually tackling something unique and actually tackling something that is going to be a game changer. So shout out to your possibility for being that example and Dion for being a great leader on your team. This is all very impressive work, and it's been a pleasure chatting with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul. It's been great to speak with you and share a little bit about our experience.